This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. This is the Fast Break Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Anderson, and I thought I would be alone for this, but I'm not. Over the phone, like an angel, Dave Oster.
Hey, everybody.
And this is the second time I'm recording this podcast. To give a little brief, idea of what's happened, and I'll tell Dave too, because I haven't talked to him. I miss my buddy who's currently out in summer league. Ricky is too, but whatever. But to tell you, Dave, I recorded yesterday, had Jake on the phone, recorded a 3-segment podcast, had it all done, was about to edit. I just got home, was about to edit, and the news broke. And I was like, motherfucker. It was a great time, and I'm kind of glad because we would have gotten a lot of feedback from the Knicks on the losers part of the winners and losers of NBA free agency, and the Pelicans segment I recorded was absolutely horrible. So round 2, let's give it a shot. It should be a fun time, and we're obviously talking about the Kawhi Leonard news. I was joking, Dave, before on the solo podcast that we were pretty much in the dark on all of this, and we were relying on Chris Carter to break all of the news surrounding Kawhi Leonard.
Yikes.
Unfortunately and thankfully, he was not the source of news that we could be trusted, and it was Wojnarowski that dropped the bomb that has Kawhi Leonard signing with the Clippers for a 4-year, $142 max, and the Clippers acquiring Paul George. They acquire the Oklahoma City Thunder, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and Danilo Gallinari, and I believe 5 picks. It is a full 3 3 unprotected first-round picks in 2022, 2024, and 2026. And they give Oklahoma City the right to swap first-rounders in intervening years, so in 2023 and in 2025. And as well, they got 2 other first-round picks, mainly that 2021 Miami pick. So we'll start off by just saying we're going to talk about the Clippers in a segment. We'll talk about OKC and how it affects them in a segment. And then we'll talk about the Raptors in a segment. And there's going to be a weird break that after the OKC segment, there's going to be a segment with Jake on the 76ers. That is pre-Kawhi Leonard. It might be weird, but giving you a heads up now. But that's the way it does because I didn't record an outro for that, Dave. That's how it happens. But let's jump into it. Let's jump into it. Kawhi Leonard is now a Clipper. What was your immediate reaction? Because you guys were sleeping.
Yeah. I woke up to this news at about 6 a.m. and proceeded to whip a pillow across the room, hitting Ricky in the face, and just screamed at him for about 10 seconds about the news because it was like, what the fuck is happening? And then it was just like scrolling through Discord trying to read everything to catch up with you guys. It was an amazing way to wake up, and I'm sure Ricky forgave me pretty quickly for whipping a pillow at his head for dropping that news bomb on him. No, it's awesome. It's absolutely awesome because the parity in the NBA has never been better. Like, this team for the Clippers is going to be insane defensively because, like you said, it's not only Kawhi Leonard, it's also the Paul George shit on top of it, which is just, there's a lot of mixed feelings around that situation because the whole, are we supposed to feel good that Kawhi Leonard convinced Paul George to demand a trade out after signing, the deal, on the eve of Paul George Day in Oklahoma City? Is it a little scummy? Maybe. But does it make for an amazing team and a story for the Clippers? Absolutely.
Well, let's get into that because I'm interested to hear your thoughts on it because I do want to talk about the secrecy surrounding this whole Kawhi stuff because, whenever we hear news, it's pretty instant. Whenever that stuff happens, that's immediately getting sent to us. And apparently Monday, so a whole 5 days it took for us to know that Paul George demanded a trade and that it was all dependent on Kawhi and the Clippers getting Paul George to the Clippers for him to sign there. I find that absolutely fascinating. That did not break at all. You're finding it scummy?
Well, I think the scummy part's the fact that, Kawhi is the one who is going out and, being like, Paul, you should demand a trade from your team and we can play together. Well, we just gave, LeBron criticism because Rich Paul and Anthony Davis and that whole drama and saga of basically poaching a player from another team under contract to tell him you want to demand a trade to get out and play with me. It's a little different because it's Kawhi Leonard versus LeBron James, and it's in the offseason versus the regular season. But with all that being said, it is still kind of interesting that there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of backlash about this contact and poaching,
Well, I think the biggest reason why is just because that's the NBA today. I mean, we are just kind of conditioned to all of this. It happened, and in any other sport, it would probably be a scandal in some ways. But in the NBA, it's like, whatever. I mean, we see Kyrie and Kevin Durant just being like, yeah, they were planning this out before the season. Like,
True.
That's just the way that this stuff happens in the NBA. And I agree that we were totally blindsided by it. And I can totally see the part of, like, where the hell did this come from? But in the end, this is historic. I mean, this is absolutely crazy. And if this is what the players wanted, it's what the players wanted. I know people in Oklahoma City are probably pissed off at Paul George, and they rightfully should be. I mean, you sign a 5-year contract to stay at a place, and you end up leaving just because your buddy wants to play with you. Now, I'm not blaming Paul George, but that's what the fans would think, at least in OKC, and I totally understand. I would not, blame them for feeling that way. And I think it's ultimately crazy because now you look at the NBA and you talk about the parity part. And I talked about this yesterday, the way that the NBA would shape out, specifically the West, and the way that the Pelicans could possibly sneak into the playoffs. And obviously I threw in Oklahoma City, but even before this news and this trade happened, I was still putting them lower half, and they had 2 stars in Russell Westbrook and Paul George. And you look at now this Western Conference, and you have Steph and Clay, obviously Clay hurt, but you have Steph, Clay, and D'Angelo, along with Draymond in Golden State. You have Denver, solid young nucleus of Jokic, Murray, and Harris. And then you have Portland with CJ and Dame, Houston with Chris Paul and James Harden, Utah with now Mike Conley and Donovan Mitchell, OKC just left alone with Russell Westbrook, San Antonio with DeMar and LaMarcus, LA with Kawhi and Paul George, Sacramento with that young nucleus led by De'Aaron Fox, the Lakers obviously with LeBron James and AD, Minnesota with Wiggins and Cat.
You got to give the Cousins mention,
and
too.
the $3.5 million player in DeMarcus Cousins. Remember when I said I should have maxed them? Memphis, who's just buying out terrible contracts. Minnesota with Cat and Wiggins. I think I sent that just in case. Pelicans, who are super young and interesting with Zion. Dallas, who are super young and interesting with KP and Luka. And then the Suns, who are the Suns. But, if Booker and Ayton take steps, they could be a dangerous, force out there. So looking at that Western Conference, clearly the Clippers are moving ahead of this whole pack, but where would you put them right now?
1? I mean, honestly, 1. It's scary as hell because Paul George was the near MVP last year. I think he was, 4th in MVP voting. He had an incredible year. His shooting trailed off a little bit, but his defense was incredible. The on-off numbers supported that the whole season. And just adding him as a amazing two-way player. You add Kawhi Leonard, who, he may only give you 60 games, but those 60 games are going to have him a super high win percentage because he's clutch. He's just a great scorer, great defender. Can take anyone ISO, and the defense, the scoring. You talk about the depth on that Clippers team between Montrezl Harrell, Lou Will, Pat Bev. You have Shamet on the bench now. They just have pieces everywhere, and just gritty defensive starting 4, especially with Mo Harkless now. I mean, they've got options for everything. It's a really impressively built lineup, and I mean, all credit to Jerry West. This is some fucking masterpiece shit again. I don't know how he keeps doing this.
Yeah, Paul George ended up 3rd in voting. Jokic was 4th. I said preseason.
Oh, right.
Then we would have been 3rd, so fuck the media for that one. But going back to the Jerry West thing, he is a genius, but the question that I saw immediately pop up were people were saying, oh, well, everyone said that the Pelicans stole this from the Lakers and that they paid too much. And now that Paul George is coming out, and people can make the argument that AD is a better player than Paul George, although Paul George finished 3rd in MVP voting this year, that, the Clippers giving up what they gave up in a great player in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Danilo Gallinari, who's going to free up $18 million after this year and can still contribute to a team for Oklahoma City, and then giving them 5 picks, pretty much. I mean, you're not likely going to see those pick swaps happen just because the Clippers are most likely going to be better than the Thunder. But in the end, you're getting 3 unprotected firsts, and then along with that coveted Miami pick, and there's another one in there as well, but I'm not sure which one it is. But I know the Miami one was in there. You look at all of that, and do you think it's more value than they should have give up, less value than they should have give up, and how would you compare it to the AD trade?
I think value-wise, I've never seen draft picks have less value, at this point. I don't know if it's less value or more value at any point in the NBA. Just it's weird because we're just seeing them moved in mass quantities to get things done for teams, and I mean, credit to the Clippers for stockpiling those picks up, but at the same time, it's a question of, okay, if you're betting on yourselves being able to, maintain the Kawhi Leonard PG combo together for more than 4 years, then you're fine with this deal. Like, that's basically the answer, which is actually asking a lot in today's NBA. With the way players move around, there's no guarantee that this is a long-term stay. I mean, yes, we'd all like to believe that Paul George and Kawhi are home, they're going to be happy there, and they like the system, they like the coach, everything works out great for them, but there are no guarantees in the NBA with player contracts these days. So those picks, what today seems like 5 picks, a couple picks and a couple pick swaps, in a couple of years could look great, could look terrible. It could be, the Nets all over again.
Mm-hmm.
I think value-wise, Paul George, Anthony Davis, the Paul George price feels less today because you don't have names attached. I mean, those are basically the last pick is like a 12-year-old right now, right? I mean, it's hard to conceptualize the value for a pick in 2025,
Yeah.
So I think because of all the talent and names that were exchanged for Anthony Davis trade, that one seems like it had the heavier cost to pay. It does kind of make sense, though, now, because, okay, well, they had to pay that because maybe the Clippers were in it to try to get Anthony Davis to be their second star instead of Paul George initially.
Mm-hmm.
So, they weren't just bidding against themselves, perhaps. But I think value-wise, the Clippers did a great job because those picks in the future, if everything goes right, they're 20 through 30 picks. And while they may have picked some gems from that section in the past, at this point in time, I think that they're going to be able to get some depth picks in the second round if they ever need to, or they'll have role players they can kind of rotate through. But, I mean, they're on a championship track, and young talent is not something you don't need draft picks in the next couple of years to help finish out a championship roster.
Yeah, we're going to start broad and then narrow in, and I kind of want to talk about that value and stick with that idea of the picks that they gave up. And I think the reason why people kind of hated on what the Lakers did was obviously, one, it's the Lakers. And, I mean, it's and you bring up a good point about the names, too. I think the biggest thing that people are taking away is you're getting hate because you're the Lakers, but no one's saying it's a bad deal. You traded for Anthony Davis. You got to start next to LeBron. You have to hit that window. If someone's saying that's a bad deal, they're most likely a Laker hater. The Pelicans got a great haul, and so did the Thunder, but in the end, I don't think it's really crazy value either way, and that's mainly just because if we look at this deal, it's going to have Paul George joining the Clippers with 2 more years, $68 million remaining, plus a $37.8 million player option in 2021. All right, so they got at least Paul George and Kawhi for 2 years, and I think the reason why it doesn't matter about these values and those picks, like you were saying, is it might hurt you in 2025, but it won't matter if you get this team their first title in history. And I think that's what it's becoming because it is so volatile that players are leaving and moving all around the NBA, and it might hurt you instead of helping you. So right now, you got to benefit and you got to attack those times that it is helping you. You're not going to have the opportunity to get Kawhi Leonard and Paul George again. Maybe if you waited a little bit longer, you would have been able to get bigger names down the line. But right now, everyone's in an idea of we need to win right now. And especially Steve Ballmer, who just bought the team fairly recently, is probably feeling that he needs to hit on this. And Jerry West isn't getting any younger, so he's probably feeling that he needs to hit on this window. And while
I mean, look at the Cavs. No one's regretting, sacrificing the future to get that championship window when they had it.
And we're going to talk about the Raptors later. I don't think Raptor fans are going to be pissed off about this. I mean, they're probably bummed out that Kawhi's not returning, but they probably had the feeling since that trade was made with the Spurs that he wasn't coming back.
Exactly.
So I find it crazy that this deal happened, and I think that we'll probably see more like this. That teams that are in lower markets like San Antonio, and they're still a great basketball city, but they are a smaller market, and obviously Oklahoma City, a smaller market as well, they're going to take that ability to grow and pick homegrown talent like they've done before. That's how the Spurs got great before, picking Manu, picking Tony, picking Robinson, picking Duncan. And then also with the Thunder, they picked KD. The Supersonics did. The Supersonics / Thunder picked Westbrook. And the Thunder picked James Harden. They built all of that from the ground up, and that's where they're going to need to attack, where teams like Los Angeles, Lakers and Clippers, Knicks and Nets, and then hopefully Chicago, for you guys' sakes, will be able to attract these big stars, but it's really just now based on the owner and what they're offering to these players. And if we look at what the Clippers were offering to Kawhi Leonard, it was the ability to start at a new place again, like he was at the Raptors, no titles, no legends around him, and then as well giving him a stability owner and a great head of basketball operations like he had before in Toronto and in San Antonio. Going from Pop to Masai Ujiri and then to Jerry West pretty much, that's a great transition and great three-team move right there. And you look at the ownerships as well. Ballmer, I don't know who the fuck owns the Spurs, but that's probably a good thing. You probably shouldn't know the owners. And same with the Raptors too. I don't know who the fuck owns them, but they're probably doing a good job if they're not in the news. Jerry Reinsdorf's hated because he's bad. James Dolan is hated because he's bad. The Lakers owners are synonymous because they're bad, a la Jeannie Buss, or her dad in the opposite way. He was so great building franchises that he was well known. In the end, I think that's why this move to the Clippers happened, and I think that's why the deal makes sense, just because you got to hit on this window if you're the Clippers. Let's move now into 2019 for the Clippers. You said it does make them the best team in the NBA, correct?
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, so let's talk about the lineup and what makes them the best. They brought back Patrick Beverley. He'll be one of the starting guards most likely for them. They have Lou Williams, 6th man of the year for 15 years straight, what it feels like. They have Landry Shamet still around. Traded Shai Gilgeous. How do you feel about that?
I think it was worth it. I mean, Shai looks like he'll be a really nice player. Do I know if he's going to be a superstar yet? No. He's got great size. He's got great instincts, though. And he's going to be a good player.
Yeah.
But
he kind of feels like a Thunder player, right?
But, yeah, I was going to say, athletically, gifted. Basketball-wise, he's way more skilled than the majority of their picks have been in the last couple of years.
Arms long.
But, yeah, no, I think it's one of those things. It's like, is he going to be good? Yes. Is he going to be Paul George good? I wouldn't put money on anything, anything close to that. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we look at their lineup. Obviously, they're going to be able to try out Kawhi and Paul George. You'll see Montrezl Harrell as well. They just signed Ivica Zubac to a 4-year, $128 deal. And then as well, they got pretty decent depth in the back end. What do you think ultimately this starting lineup's going to shape out to be?
I think you're going to have Pat Bev at the 1, Paul George 2, Kawhi 3, Harkless 4, and Zubac 5.
That's a big-ass lineup.
You can flex Harkless out of the starting lineup, but just think about the defense 1 through 4 there. Like, Mo Harkless, for people who did not watch Portland last year, basically he was guarding the opposing one wing on the other team. So he knows the responsibility. He's long. He's good. He's athletic. Like, yes, he will never have amazing jaw-dropping offensive numbers, but he is an excellent role player wing, good defender. If you don't want to do that lineup, you can go smaller and shift him out of that lineup and put in another guard. Mm-hmm. Who that would be specifically, if you want to go with Shamet, adds shooting from the outside, sure. Lou Will doesn't start. That's just his jam. So maybe like a Jerome Robinson, someone we're watching in Summer League. I don't know. I'm not really a huge fan of him.
Yeah, what have you seen from him?
Starter on this team yet? He's had a couple good passes, decent court vision. Shooting-wise, he's still not there. So I don't think he's ready to be in the starting lineup that's going to be competing for probably an NBA Finals and a playoff.
Yeah.
So
oh, go ahead.
I think he's coming off the bench. I think they go long. I don't know. Maybe Shamet does stay in the starting lineup though. That probably gives them the best opportunity mix of shooting and defense.
Well, that's my thought. That I think that they go with Shamet because looking at this lineup, Pat Bev obviously going to bring a ton of defense, can bring up the ball, but he's not really a facilitator. But I don't think you need that necessarily in this lineup. Shamet, like you said, is going to probably sit up beyond the arc and shoot from the outside. And improved his defense as well while he was on the Clippers.
Yeah.
And then probably Kawhi at the 3, Paul George at the 4. You could flip that either way you want. I mean, they're both going to be able to defend either positions. And I don't really know who's better, so I don't know who's going to... Like, if they play LeBron James, who's guarding who? You putting Kawhi and LeBron?
Like it's just, whatever possession. That's a toss-up, honestly.
Yeah.
I know, because earlier in their careers, Kawhi was the better defender. At this point in their careers, Paul George probably is the better defender.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so
I'd put Paul George on him.
It'd be interesting either Kawhi or Paul George at the 4, but I don't think it matters in the end. And then going obviously with Did you say Zubac or Harrell at the 5?
Zubac at 5. Because Harrell comes off the bench. He'll play the fucking end of the game for them as well. Zubac's got a good offensive touch, and I think he gives them a little bit better spacing. Harrell just bangs down low, which is awesome, and he's an energy guy. I just love their second unit, and I think that's what makes them dynamic. Like, we talk about the Lakers and having Anthony Davis, now Boogie, and LeBron James. Like, those three together are incredible, but they have no depth. And that's where, like, you end up with the best of both worlds on the Clippers because you have that incredible defensive starting unit with 2 superstars, a great defender, a 5 who can score for you. But you also have the 6th man of the year, and guess what? One of the runner-ups to the 6th man of the year on your bench. I mean, you're never going to have downtime on that Clippers team. I think that's what makes them special.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the thing that really sells me on this team is that second unit, like you were saying, and we look at the team that just won the NBA title in the Toronto Raptors, and that's what really pushed them over the edge, was having that second unit, and that's what hurt the Warriors. I mean, the Warriors were built on having the ability of going to Andre Iguodala and Sean Livingston off the bench, and it kind of hurt them this year not having that depth, you know? So yeah. I think now that's going to be a really positive upside to them, is being able to rotate players, and especially veterans off that bench too, along with some of these young guys like Wilson Chandler, onto the floor, and being able to take possessions away and give rest to Kawhi and Paul George. At least on the floor, how do you think they're going to look? Because I was a little concerned about Kawhi and Paul George being on the same team. I know Paul George has at least upped his shooting from the outside, and they're both very good shooters from the outside, but that's not really their games when I think of them. I think of them more of attacking in the mid-range. Do you think that's going to be a problem, that they might just, trade off pretty much ISO possessions of attacking and shooting in the mid-range, or do you think we're going to see a more spaced out play? Because Paul George did shoot around like 10 threes this year, but before he was, came over, he was shooting like, 6 to 5 a night.
Yeah, I think they'll be fine on spacing. Pat Beverly and Shamet both give them great space at the guard, so I expect Doc to kind of roll out, and this is weird because last year they were rolling basically 3 guards for the second half of the season in their starting lineup. But because they have such big bodies out there, I think they're going to take advantage of that. I do expect Paul George, probably not 10 threes a game again, but somewhere in that 7 to 8 range. They're going to be able to space it out. Offensive set-wise, I do expect some ISO, though. Like, I think that they're going to fall into that very, very heavily late in games. And yeah, good thing necessarily, I don't know with this team yet, because honestly, the late in games, you're going to see some fun lineups where, like, you're going to see Lou Will, Pat Bev, Shamet, Kawhi, and then, like, Zubac out there, Harrell. Like, you're going to see just a wide variety of these units out there. So it's kind of like just a jumble at this point, trying to figure out what they're going to do. I think Doc's just got so many options available to him that, if you need a lineup to play big and defensive, you've got that. If you need some group that you're like, hey, we're going to bang the boards, we're going to play, Harrell and Zubac together and just absolutely dominate them down low. Like, you have that option. So I'm not sure necessarily ball movement's probably not going to be amazing, considering Pat Beverly really, like you said, he's not like an amazing facilitator. He's a solid point guard. He gets the ball going. Assist-wise, he's never killed it, but that's never been asked of him, to be, like, getting, 9 assists a game or anything crazy like Rubio levels,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the question I want to ask and what we'll end on is, what's their weakness?
Load management? I mean, honestly, if there's anything, it's like, make sure Kawhi's leg is good, make sure Paul George is healthy. Like, that's the thing, is just those 2 guys, I think, each are going to be out there for about 60 to 65 games this year. I don't expect them to play much more than that during the regular season. And I think with this roster built the way it is today, they're going to be fine. I don't know if they're going to be the number 1 seed going into the playoffs, but they are going to be the best team. Yeah,
and when we assume when Paul George got hurt, it was near, I think it was March, and in those last 18 games, he was shooting like 40% from the field, 34% from 3, and scoring about 26 a night. But he was also, averaging like about 3 turnovers a game. So he really took a swing, and that was one thing, too, where he needed to play so much because they were needing to push and make sure they make the playoffs. That would be the biggest concern, is balancing their loads, like you were saying. Don't laugh. Balancing their loads and making sure that they didn't get overworked. and being able to still be a competitive team out there. That's the one thing that's crazy about this, is that they gave up 2 of their 3 best scorers last year, Tobias Harris and Danilo Gallinari, and became the best team in the NBA. But being able to balance that and making sure that you're not really suffering on the court when one of them or both of them are off. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing that we make sure of. But again, we love the fact that their bench can be so competitive out there. So it will definitely be interesting to see.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, the flexibility there is perfect for this team moving forward, because you don't need to have both those guys out there every given night. You know, you can see nights where one rests, the other, doesn't. You just trade off, and I'm telling you, it's going to be an awesome season for the Clippers. Let
us know what you think of the Clippers, not reactions, but their transactions down in the comments below. We're going to be really intrigued to see what you guys think. I think we'll probably hear some hot takes, Dave, hearing some Laker fans being like they're the best team in the NBA. I think that right now you have to look at that roster, you have to look at that front office, you have to look at the coach. And while you might not have the 2 better stars, I would still take LeBron and AD over Paul George and Kawhi. While you might not have the better stars, they do have the better team. And when it comes to the playoffs, in those 7 games, making sure that everyone can contribute is going to be more important than those 2 guys. So let us know what you think down below. Do you think that the Clippers are the best team in the NBA?